The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Avenue as Joseph walked toward his usual bench. At 48, he had learned to appreciate these quiet moments after another demanding day. Running his construction company, his gray suit, burgundy tie still perfectly knotted, spoke of success built through decades of hard work. But today felt different somehow. As he approached the familiar wooden bench overlooking the charming cobblestone street, he noticed a small figure already there. A little girl in a sunshine yellow dress with white stripes at the hem sat swinging her legs, a colorful children's book clutched in her tiny hands. Her brown hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "Excuse me, sir," came a small voice as he settled onto the other end of the bench. Joseph looked down to find the most earnest pair of brown eyes he had ever seen. The child had turned toward him, her book still held tightly against her chest. "Yes, sweetheart," Joseph replied, his voice naturally softening in the way it always did around children. The little girl took a deep breath, as if gathering tremendous courage. "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy ... just for one day?" The words hung in the air between them like autumn leaves caught in a gentle breeze. Joseph felt his heart skip, not knowing whether to smile or feel concerned. He had heard many unusual requests in his lifetime, but nothing quite like this. "That's quite a big question, little one," he said carefully. "What's your name?" "Linda," she whispered, then added with the matter-of-fact honesty only children possess. "I'm 5 years old, and tomorrow is Daddy-Daughter Day at my school." Joseph felt something shift inside his chest. 20 years of marriage, countless business deals, community leadership roles, yet he had never been blessed with children of his own. The longing had settled into a quiet ache he rarely acknowledged anymore. "Where are your parents, Linda?" She pointed across the street to the warm glow of Murphy's Diner. "Mama's working the dinner shift. She works there every day, and sometimes at the grocery store too. She says we can't afford for her to take time off for school things." Joseph followed her gaze to see a woman about his age moving efficiently between tables. Her movements, speaking of exhaustion, masked by determination. Even from this distance, he could see the resemblance between mother and daughter, and your daddy. Linda's small shoulders rose and fell. "I don't have one. Mama says he went away before I was born. But all the other kids have daddies coming tomorrow, and I thought, ... maybe." Her voice trailed off, as if the enormity of her request had suddenly dawned on her. The businessman in Joseph wanted to find a polite way to decline and continue on his way, but something deeper, something that recognized the courage it had taken this little girl to ask a complete stranger for help, kept him rooted to the spot. "Tell me about this Daddy-Daughter Day," he said gently. Linda's face brightened immediately. "Oh, it's wonderful. The daddies come to school and read stories with us, and we have a tea party with cookies, and then we show them our artwork, and at the end, we get to tell everyone one special thing about our daddy." Her excitement was infectious, but Joseph noticed how she spoke about it as an observer rather than a participant. This child had been watching other families for 5 years, learning what she was missing. "Linda, I'm honored that you asked me," Joseph said slowly, "but pretending to be someone's daddy is a very serious thing." "I know," she said solemnly. "That's why I've been sitting here for 3 days, watching people walk by. I needed to find someone kind, someone who would be gentle with my feelings." 3 days. This little girl had been conducting her own careful interview process, and somehow he had passed her test. Joseph looked at Linda's hopeful face, then across at her mother, who was balancing 3 plates on one arm while taking an order. He thought of his own comfortable but quiet house, his successful but solitary life. When had someone last needed him for something that truly mattered? "What made you choose me, Linda?" "You sit here every day and feed the pigeons," she said simply. "And yesterday, when that old man dropped his wallet, you ran after him to give it back. Mama always says you can tell good people by how they treat things smaller than them." The observation hit Joseph like a gentle revelation. This 5-year-old had been watching him, studying his character, and found him worthy of her trust. The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders like a warm coat. "If I said yes," Joseph said carefully, "what would you need me to do?" Linda's entire face lit up like the string lights beginning to twinkle in the shop windows around them. "Just come to my school tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Mrs. Patterson will show you where to sit. We'll read a story together and have cookies, and you can see the picture I painted of flowers. And then, She paused, suddenly shy again. And then when it's time to tell everyone about our daddies, I could say that mine is very kind and has a nice smile and knows how to make little girls feel special. Joseph felt his throat tighten. In all his years of business negotiations, charity board meetings, and community events, no one had ever summed up what they needed from him so simply or so completely. Linda, I need to ask you something very important. Have you talked to your mama about this? Linda's face fell slightly. No, sir. She's been working so much, and she gets that worried look when I talk about school things she can't help with. I didn't want to make her sad. The maturity in this child's reasoning amazed Joseph. She was protecting her mother's feelings while trying to solve her own problem. Well, I think we need to talk to her first, don't you? This is too important a decision to make without her. Linda nodded seriously. Will you come meet her now? She gets a break in 15 minutes. Joseph found himself standing up, his decision made not by his logical mind, but by something much deeper. Lead the way, Miss Linda. They crossed the street. Together, Linda's small hand, slipping naturally into his larger one. The simple gesture sent an unexpected warmth through Joseph's chest. Murphy's Diner smelled of fresh coffee and home-cooked meals. The woman Linda had pointed out looked up as they entered, her eyes immediately scanning for threats before registering confusion. Linda, honey, what are you doing, and who is this gentleman? Mama, this is Mr. Joseph. He's the kind man I told you about who feeds the pigeons. Linda's mother, Sarah, wiped her hands on her apron and approached cautiously. Joseph could see the protective wariness in her eyes, the instinct of a single mother who had learned to be careful. I'm Joseph Mitchell, he said, extending his hand. Your daughter has made me a rather unique request, and I felt it important to speak with you first. Sarah's expression shifted to alarm. Linda, what did you ask this man? Linda looked between her mother and Joseph, suddenly uncertain. I asked if he could pretend to be my daddy for Daddy-Daughter Day tomorrow. The color drained from Sarah's face. Oh, honey, no. You can't just ask strangers. She turned to Joseph with mortified eyes. I'm so sorry, Mr. Mitchell. I work 2 jobs, and sometimes she spends too much time alone and her imagination. Mrs. Double quotes Joseph realized he didn't know their last name. Williams, Sarah Williams. Mrs. Williams, your daughter's request isn't born from imagination. It's born from a very real need and remarkable courage. She spent 3 days observing me before approaching, making sure I was someone she could trust. That speaks to excellent judgment on both your parts. Sarah blinked, clearly not expecting this response. I run Mitchell Construction downtown. Joseph continued. I'm 48 years old, never married, no children of my own. I've lived in this community for 20 years, and I can provide references if you'd like. Your daughter asked me for 1 day of my time to help her feel included at her school event. Sarah looked at Linda, then back at Joseph, processing this unexpected turn of events. But why would you want to do this? You don't even know us. Joseph knelt down to Linda's level, then looked up at Sarah. 24 hours ago, I would have said I had everything I needed in life. Success, security, respect in the community. But this little girl saw something in me that I'd forgotten I possessed. She saw someone capable of kindness, without expectation of return. He stood up, meeting Sarah's eyes directly. Mrs. Williams, I'm not asking to be part of your lives permanently. I'm simply asking for the privilege of giving your daughter one afternoon, where she feels as special as every other child in her class. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. Mr. Mitchell, this is very kind, but I couldn't possibly ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. And Linda isn't asking for anything unreasonable. She's asking for what every child deserves, to feel valued and included. Sarah looked down at Linda, who was watching this adult conversation, with the intensity of a child whose entire world might change based on its outcome. Linda, honey, why didn't you tell me about Daddy-Daughter Day? Linda's small voice carried years of careful consideration. Because you already work so hard, Mama, and you get that sad look when you can't do things for me that other mamas and daddies do for their kids. I thought maybe I could solve this one myself. Sarah knelt down and pulled Linda into a fierce hug, and Joseph saw the exact moment this strong woman's heart broke and mended simultaneously. Oh, my brave little girl, you should never have to solve problems like this by yourself. She stood up, composing herself, and faced Joseph with the dignity of someone who had fought hard for everything in her life. Mr. Mitchell, if you're serious about this, I need to know why. People don't usually help strangers without wanting something in return. Joseph was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the bench where this conversation had begun. Mrs. Williams, I've spent 20 years building a successful business, earning respect, accumulating wealth. But I realize today that I've never been asked to be someone's hero, even for just one day. Your daughter looked at me and saw potential for kindness that I'd forgotten I had. Maybe she's giving me something I need as much as I'm giving her what she needs. Sarah studied his face with the careful attention of a mother protecting her child. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because her shoulders relaxed slightly. What exactly would this involve? I attend her school event tomorrow afternoon. We read together, have cookies. I admire her artwork, and she gets to introduce me as her daddy for the day. Nothing more, nothing less. And after that, Joseph looked at Linda, who was listening with the focused attention children reserve for conversations that will determine their immediate future. After that, I go back to being the man who feeds pigeons on Maple Avenue, and Linda goes back to being the remarkable little girl who taught a grown man about courage. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, the weight of single motherhood visible in every line of her face. Linda, is this really what you want? Linda nodded solemnly. Yes, Mama, just for one day, so I can know what it feels like. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, Joseph saw a mother's love mixed with the pain of not being able to give her child everything she deserved. All right, but Mr. Mitchell, I need your word that this is just about making one little girl happy for one afternoon. You have it. Sarah turned to Linda. And you, young lady, need to understand that Mr. Mitchell is doing us an enormous kindness. This is not something people usually do. Linda nodded seriously, then looked up at Joseph with eyes full of hope and trust. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. I promise to be the best daughter ever, even if it's just for one day. The simple sincerity of her words hit Joseph harder than any business deal he'd ever closed. I'll pick you up at school at 2 o'clock tomorrow, he told Linda. What should I call you when I introduce myself to your teacher? Linda's face scrunched up in thought. Linda Mitchell. The sound of his last name paired with her first name created an unexpected tightness in Joseph's chest. That sounds perfect. As they prepared to leave the diner, Sarah caught Joseph's arm. Mr. Mitchell, I don't know how to thank you for this. Just let me give your daughter a good day. That's thanks enough. That evening, Joseph found himself in territory he'd never navigated. What does a man wear to a daddy-daughter day? What does he talk about with a 5-year-old? How does he make sure Linda feels as special as she deserves? He called his secretary and cleared his afternoon schedule, something he hadn't done for a personal matter in years. Then he drove to the bookstore and spent an hour selecting children's books, reading reviews on his phone like he was researching a major business investment. The next morning brought an unusual nervousness. Joseph found himself checking his appearance multiple times, settling on a navy suit with a cheerful yellow tie that seemed appropriate for spending time with a little girl in a sunshine dress. At precisely 2 o'clock, he stood outside Lincoln Elementary School, holding a small bouquet of yellow flowers that matched Linda's dress and carrying the books he'd selected. His palms were actually sweating, something that hadn't happened since his first major business presentation 25 years ago. Mr. Joseph. He turned to see Linda running toward him, her face radiant with excitement. She was wearing the same yellow dress from yesterday, her hair carefully braided with small yellow ribbons. You came. You really came. Of course I came, Joseph said, kneeling down to her level. I gave you my word, and I brought you these. He presented the flowers with a small bow. Linda's gasp of delight was worth every nervous moment he'd experienced since yesterday evening. They match my dress. Mama said you might not come because grown-ups sometimes forget about promises to children, but I knew you would come. Joseph felt a flash of anger at whoever had taught this child to expect disappointment from adults, but he pushed it aside and focused on making sure she would never have reason to expect it from him. Linda, when I make a promise, I keep it, especially promises to remarkable young ladies. They walked into the school together, Linda's small hand confidently tucked into his. The gymnasium had been transformed with small tables set for 2 each, decorated with paper flowers and child-made Linda Williams. Linda Mitchell, called a cheerful voice. A woman in her 30s approached with a warm smile. You must be Linda's father. I'm Mrs. Patterson, Linda's teacher. We're so delighted you could join us today." Joseph shook her hand, noting how Linda beamed at being called Linda Mitchell. "Joseph Mitchell, thank you for including me. Linda has been so excited about today. She's told us all about how wonderful her daddy is." Joseph glanced down at Linda, who was glowing with pride, and felt the full weight of the trust she'd placed in him. They found their assigned table, and Joseph helped Linda into her chair with the careful attention he'd seen other fathers show their daughters. It felt natural, as if some instinct for gentleness had awakened in him. "What would you like to read first?" he asked, showing her the books he'd brought. Linda's eyes widened at the selection. "You brought books just for me?" "Of course. A father should always come prepared for his daughter." The words slipped out naturally, and Joseph realized he meant them completely. They spent the next hour reading together, Linda's face animated as she pointed out pictures and helped sound out words. Joseph found himself genuinely fascinated by her observations, her questions, her unique way of seeing the stories. During the cookie and tea portion, Linda introduced him to her classmates with obvious pride. "This is my daddy, Mr. Joseph. He builds buildings and feeds pigeons and brings me flowers that match my dress." The other children accepted this introduction without question, the way children accept all information about adults as simply part of how the world works. "Your daughter is remarkable," another father said to Joseph. "She's been telling my son all about the books you read together at home." Joseph smiled, not correcting the assumption. For this afternoon, he was Linda's father, and she was his daughter. The pretense felt less like acting and more like stepping into a role he was meant to play. When it came time to view the children's artwork, Linda led him proudly to her section of the wall. "This is the picture I painted of flowers. I made them yellow because that's my favorite color, and I thought you might like yellow too." Joseph studied the painting with the seriousness of an art critic examining a masterpiece. Bright yellow flowers danced across the page with the joyful abandon only a child's art could capture. "Linda, this is beautiful. You're a very talented artist. Really, you're not just saying that because you're my daddy today." The question pierced through Joseph's chest. Even in her happiness, Linda was protecting herself against disappointment. "Linda, look at me." Joseph knelt down so they were eye to eye. "I would never lie to you about something this important. Your painting is wonderful because it's full of joy and hope and beauty. Those are the most important things any art can have." Linda's smile could have powered the entire school. The final activity was the moment Joseph had been both anticipating and dreading. Each child was invited to stand and share one special thing about their father. When Linda's turn came, she stood up with the confidence of a child who finally had something wonderful to share. "My daddy's name is Mr. Joseph, and he's very kind to small things. He feeds pigeons every day and helps people who drop their wallets. And when I asked him to be my daddy for just one day, he said yes because he saw that I needed to feel special. He brought me flowers that match my dress and books just for me. And he listens when I talk like what I say is important. He makes me feel like I'm worth taking care of, even though we just met yesterday." The room was completely silent when Linda finished speaking. Joseph saw several parents wipe their eyes, and Mrs. Patterson's smile was especially warm when she looked at him. "That was beautiful. Linda, you're very lucky to have such a thoughtful daddy." Linda beamed and sat back down, reaching for Joseph's hand. "Was that okay? Did I say it right?" Joseph's voice was rougher than usual when he answered. "Linda, that was perfect. Absolutely perfect." As the event wound down and families began to leave, Joseph found himself reluctant to end this magical afternoon. Linda seemed equally hesitant, walking slowly as they headed toward the exit. "Mr. Joseph." "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for being my daddy today. It was even better than I imagined." Joseph stopped walking and knelt down one final time to Linda, "I need to thank you. You gave me the best day I've had in years. You showed me what it feels like to be someone's hero, even for just a few hours. Will you still feed the pigeons tomorrow, every day?" "Good. Then I'll know where to find you if I need to tell you important things." Joseph laughed, recognizing that this remarkable child had just negotiated herself a way to maintain their connection. "That sounds like an excellent arrangement." They walked out of the school together, and Joseph saw Sarah waiting by the gate. Her face was anxious, hopeful, and grateful all at once. "Mama." Linda ran to her mother. "It was wonderful. Mr. Joseph brought me flowers and books, and everyone thought he was really my daddy." Sarah hugged Linda tightly, then looked at Joseph over her daughter's head. "How did it go?" she asked quietly. "It was an honor," Joseph said simply. "Your daughter is extraordinary." Mr. Joseph said my painting was beautiful, and he meant it. Not just Daddy pretend, meant it. Linda chattered excitedly. "And I told everyone how kind he is, and Mrs. Patterson said I was lucky, and the other kids liked him." And as Linda continued her enthusiastic recap, Joseph and Sarah walked slowly down the sidewalk, both reluctant to end this unusual day. "Mr. Mitchell," Sarah said quietly, "I can't tell you what this means. Look at her face. I haven't seen her this happy since ever, I think. She's always been a serious little girl, older than her years. Today she got to just be a 5-year-old whose daddy came to school." They reached the corner where their paths would diverge, and the reality of their arrangement settled around them. "This was supposed to be the end, Mr. Joseph," Linda said, suddenly subdued. "Tomorrow, you won't be my daddy anymore, will you?" Joseph felt his heart crack at the careful way she asked the question, protecting herself from hoping for too much. "Linda, today was special because it was what you needed. But you know I'm not really your daddy." "I know, but maybe sometimes you could still be my friend. I could still tell you about important things when I see you feeding the pigeons." Joseph looked at Sarah, who was watching this exchange with careful attention. "I think," Joseph said slowly, "that would be a wonderful arrangement. Friends are very important to have." Linda's face brightened immediately. "Good, because I have lots of important things to tell people, and Mama's always working, and the pigeons don't talk back." Sarah laughed despite herself. "Linda, honey, maybe Mr. Mitchell needs some time to think about having a 5-year-old friend who has lots of important things to say." "Actually," Joseph said, surprising himself, "I think I could use more friends who see the world the way Linda does. It might teach me some important things I've forgotten." As they prepared to part ways, Linda tugged on Joseph's jacket. "Mr. Joseph, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." Linda stood on her tiptoes, and Joseph bent down so she could whisper it. "His ear today you weren't pretending to be my daddy. You were really being my daddy. I could tell because you made me feel safe and special and like I mattered. That's what real daddies do." Joseph straightened up, his eyes suspiciously bright. This 5-year-old had just delivered a truth that hit him like lightning. "Linda," he said softly, "you made me feel like a real daddy today too." As Joseph walked home that evening, he realized that Linda had been wrong about one thing. This wasn't just about pretending for one day. Somehow, in the space of 24 hours, a little girl in a yellow dress had shown him what he'd been missing in his carefully constructed, successful, solitary life. The next afternoon, Joseph found himself walking toward his usual bench with unusual anticipation. Sure enough, Linda was there, swinging her legs and clutching a new book. "Mr. Joseph, I was hoping you'd come. I told you I'd be here. Friends keep their promises to each other. I brought a book from the library. It's about a man who builds houses, like you do. Will you read it with me?" Joseph settled onto the bench beside her, and Linda immediately snuggled against his side with the unconscious trust of a child who had found someone safe. That as he opened the book and began to read, Joseph realized that Linda had done something remarkable. She had asked him to pretend to be her father for one day, but what she had actually done was show him how to be the man he was meant to be. 3 months later, as Joseph walked Linda to her first soccer game, her small hand tucked securely in his, he thought about the afternoon when a brave little girl had asked a stranger to be her daddy for just one day. Neither of them had known that some pretenses become the most real things in our lives, or that sometimes the family we choose finds us in the most unexpected ways. "Mr. Joseph," Linda said, adjusting the yellow bow in her hair, "I'm glad you're not pretending anymore." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You're not pretend Daddy Joseph anymore. You're just Daddy Joseph. Mama said you asked her to marry you." Joseph laughed, remembering the evening 3 weeks ago when he had realized that what had started as kindness had grown into love. Love for Linda, love for Sarah, love for the family they had accidentally created together. "You're right, Linda. No more pretending. Is that okay with you?" Linda looked up at him with the same earnest expression she'd worn that first day on the bench. "Mr. Joseph, I mean Daddy Joseph, I knew from the very first day that you weren't really pretending. Real love doesn't pretend, it just is." And as they walked toward the soccer field together, Joseph marveled at how a little girl's courage to ask for one day had given him a lifetime he never knew he wanted. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the simplest requests, and sometimes the family we need finds us exactly when we're ready to be found.